About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Now looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved
by a whole grade.
by a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.
Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really appreciated. James here. We are going to crank it up today with regard to the GCSE P revision. This is going to be a busy session. We are going to push you, so be ready. There's a lot for us to go over here. So a couple of things before we get pretty much immediately into it. Thing number one, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are very close to hitting our first target, which is 1,000 subscribers. Do that, please. It's a very small act for you. It makes a significant difference to what we can offer to you for free. So join that as a community contribution. It costs you literally zero. Please do it. If you want to hit a like as well, that's great, but you know, the subscribing is the important thing. Secondly, you need to have your notes pages with you. If you don't have them already, or if you're watching this on demand, the notes pages are also just down in the description. Get those, print them off, and have them in front of you. It's really important that you do that. And thirdly, we also have those kind of interactive elements. We like the fun bit where we ask you about your revision break photos. Do submit those to us via Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with the hashtag revision break. Please do that. We love to see those photos. It actually keeps us going on a Monday afternoon when we're working hard. But perhaps more importantly, we've also got the interactive questions that we would like you to have a go at. And today, there's actually a couple of questions on that interactive questions. If you go to the EverLearner, if you hit news, let's wait till Martha's ready. If you hit news, and on news you see interactive questions there. Go into those interactive questions and you'll see there's GCSE PE Effective Exercise Session 2. Go into there, and that includes some of the more challenging question writing that you can do for your course. Now those do vary slightly from qualification to qualification, but go and have a little look at that and go and get yourselves involved with submitting those answers. We are going to show you some answers today which relate exactly to that, but we really do want you to contribute by contributing your answers so that we can share them more widely. Those of you that have done that already on those forms, thank you so much. We are about this close to starting to push those out to people, so we really just need a few more from you, and then we can go from there. So I meant to introduce Martha right at the start. Martha's with us this afternoon, controlling everything. Hello, good afternoon. How are we?
Very well, thank you.
So we're estimating here we may well have like about 45 minutes worth of, within the hour, about 45 minutes worth of sort of teaching, you know. So we're going to have to go here. Can I remind you, just before I push this, if I say something, and for example, you kind of think, what was that thing that guy said? What did James say? You've got the DVR on the live stream. You can just drag it back and just listen to that again. Obviously, you can't drag us into the future because I haven't happened in the future yet, but you can just drag us back. And also, when you've got little bits of downtime in the show today, you should be answering those questions. So you lot out there, no excuses. You have got a busy hour. Make it a busy hour. If it goes too fast for you, then you can come back to it a little bit later on and you can review it in a bit more detail. And I should have said, actually, Martha, halfway through, we'll also show you that we've now prepared the GCSEP playlist of all our YouTube videos now and the ones coming in the future, which you teachers out there can embed on your own platforms. Okay, so whether you've got Moodle or you've got Firefly, whatever, you can embed our entire revision playlist that we're building into your platform, and you can get your students to access it that way. So super easy. Right, we are changing from this microphone to this microphone, so be prepared to make a little volume change if it's necessary. Martha, I'm ready when you are. Okay. Okay, short-term effects of exercise. Now, the first point I want to make is that if you are studying on any exam board other than AQA, short-term effects of exercise means anything which is not long-term, such as what happens immediately when we start exercising, and kind of in the in the time period of kind of like the exercise zone. The reason I'm mentioning that is because if you are an AQA student, you separate this into two considerations. One is the immediate effects of exercise, and the other is the short term, or 24 to 36 hours after exercise kind of period. So this here is for anyone studying AQA. You might think about separating your short-term effects into these two groups, and I think it's important. Everyone else, these two groups are effectively unified, okay, and we consider those to be the same thing, so just be aware of that. Secondly, we're talking about the short-term effects of exercise basically on the human body. Okay, so the way we need to deal with such a kind of a huge topic, I mean, it's gigantic, is we're going to analyze it, we're going to break it down into system-based chunks. But one of the things I'd like you guys to realize is that when I talk about skeletal in a second, please realize it's related to the muscular system. These are not separate entities. These are unified, or at least they're corresponding and adjacent considerations, and they influence and affect one another, which we'll see right from the start. So I think it's important to clarify that point. The other thing before we sort of really jump into this, I want to repeat that we are going to push you hard in this session. So I'm going to be specifically using good quality language. Specifically, we're going to be pushing you to write really good quality answers. If you need to use our DVR and drag back and take things again, and take longer than the whole hour session, then do that, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. You might need to do that. Okay, all that being said, let's get on with it. I want to initially address what I would consider to be the skeletal impact of exercise. The effects of exercise, I should say, on the skeletal system. And we have Julie here, and of course Julie is participating in the sport of netball, which combines sort of both aerobic and anaerobic work within the performance. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective. Now, the first things I want to talk to you about is that, and I think this is a super important point, one of the key things we need to grasp hold of is that when we start exercising, we produce extra levels of synovial fluid. So reflect for a second what synovial fluid is. It is the gel-like innards of a synovial cavity within a synovial joint. So let's take, just for argument's sake, let's take Julie's shoulder joint. The synovial fluid is going to increase, first of all, it's going to increase in production, but we're also going to get that increase in temperature within that joint generally, but specifically within that fluid. And as a result of that, we are going to get a decrease in synovial viscosity. Woof! What a description. Now, synovial viscosity means that this increased production of synovial fluid, which is now warmer within the muscle, becomes kind of looser and more fluid, less sticky, if you like. It becomes less viscous, less sticky. And what is the overall impact of that? Well, all of that means that Julie, at her shoulder and other joints, experiences an increase, or let me say an increased ROM, an increased range of movement at the joint. Now, I think we'd all agree that within exercise conditions, having an increased range of movement is a really significant point, because it effectively allows us to complete full ranges of motion at the joint. It allows us to apply force over a longer period of time. It allows us to be technically correct in our performance if extreme flexibility is required, beyond the points that we can reach for things. We can take high rebounds, this kind of stuff within the netball environment. But all of that means that we're going to get a better quality performance. So we're really interested in these sorts of notions. Now, if we were to look at that in combination, remember we are doing it in combination with the muscular system, we'd also notice a few things there. Look at this combined point. We get an up arrow, I'm not going to write increased anymore, an up arrow of muscular temperature. So temperature influences both the skeletal system and the muscular system. What are the impacts of this? Well, look, we get an increase, dodgy arrow, James, we get an increase in contractile force. So this increase in temperature means that the muscle fiber, this muscle, which is made up of lots of hair-like fibers in the muscle, it's able to contract inwards with more force. It's able to contract inwards with more force. So on that basis, with more force, sometimes I try and rush too much, with more force. So if this muscle is contracting with more force, of course, what does that mean for us? It means that tendon end there and that tendon end there are effectively applying more force onto some bone somewhere that's going past. Okay, so these bones at either end are experiencing more force application. If they're experiencing more force, then of course our movement is more powerful, stronger, speedier, faster, these sorts of notions. So that increased contractile force is really, really significant from our performance. We'll also say that because of our warm-up, I think I've got a different colour, let me change, we get increased flexibility. Sometimes I've seen the word extensibility, increased flexibility of muscles, which if we go back to the point we made before, where am I? Increased ROM, then of course we're talking about a muscle and being able to move a joint through a greater range. And as I said before, that's going to increase our technical performance and allow us to perform at a better level. Excuse me. Now, we also get things like increased CO2 production in the muscle. Increased CO2 production. If guys, increased lactic acid production, especially during anaerobic work. The CO2 production is during aerobic work, of course. Increased lactic acid production. So these things begin to happen within the muscle. Now, run out of space, what that could lead to is experiences of fatigue. It could lead to obla, depending on how much of this work here that we actually do. But those are possibilities for the effect of exercise on the muscle. So it depends on those factors, okay? So we've got increased temperature, increased contractile force, we've got increased flexibility, we've got more production of CO2, which of course is aerobic. I'm not going to get into where it comes from, but just let's accept that for now. And we get increased productions of lactic acid, especially for any higher intensity anaerobic work, which can lead to fatigue and the onset of blood lactate accumulation, that point where blood lactate increases rapidly because we're doing too much anaerobic work for it to be sustainable. So all these muscular effects take place. Let's have a little look at cardiac for a second. So we have got things such as, excuse me, we have got, for example, up arrow, an increase in SV. Remember that SV is stroke volume. One of the things we'd encourage you to remember is that cardiac output equals stroke volume times heart rate. Okay, so of course, during exercise, it's often the case that we want to get this cardiac output up. Okay, so of course, if we experience an increase in stroke volume, that is going to be beneficial towards that end. So an increase in stroke volume. Now, you might ask yourself a question, well, why is that? Why does more blood leave the left ventricle per contraction? And there's a very basic answer to that. There's more blood arriving back at the heart. That's the main reason. And beyond that, the heart is being stretched further. And of course, when a muscle, in this case, the badly drawn heart muscle, oof, that really does have a big left side. When this muscle gets filled up more and it stretches because it's fuller, okay, it stretches out because it's fuller, of course, think about what's going to happen then to anything that's elastic when it contracts back in. Actually, that downwards is only in the atrial systole, but anyway. So imagine you're going to get that increased force. So therefore, we've got more blood coming back to the heart and we've got a greater amount of blood leaving the heart because the heart is stretched and boom, pings back with more force. So it's a nice little thing to remember. So we've got increase in stroke volume, really, really important. We also, of course, and we all know this, we get an increase in heart rate. Our heart goes from being something like 60 to 80 beats per minute at rest, and for you guys it can go as high as something in the region of 205 beats per minute. So of course we're getting a dramatic increase in stroke volume if we go to maximal exercise conditions. So therefore that is a significant change. We also need to think about the fact that we get therefore an increase in cardiac output. Now for those of you that do like symbols, just be aware that you can, if you really want to, you can refer to cardiac output as Q dot. It must have a dot above it like that. But generally speaking, I don't use that with GCSE students. Not totally sure why, but you can think about it that way. But what we certainly get is we get an increase in our heart rate, an increase in our stroke volume, which has the product effect of having an increase in cardiac output. Now, just if it's helpful, cardiac output can go from as little as 5 litres per minute of blood leaving the heart to typical figures around about 28 litres, but you can get even 30 to 40 litres during maximal exercise with really good athletes. So that increase in cardiac output is really, really, really significant. Now, let's have a little look. I'm going to jump down here to the right-hand side. Let's have a little look at some vascular stuff. So vascular, just remind yourself, means the blood and the blood vessels. That's what we mean by vascular. So let's have a look at what we're talking about here? First of all, we get an increase in blood pressure. So blood pressure goes up. Now, when we say that, it sounds a bit like it's negative. Oh, high blood pressure. But of course, in this sense, what we're achieving is that the blood is working against any kind of resistance it might have and being delivered more frequently, more, and we'll see in a second, more accurately, but in greater quantities to where it's needed. So that blood pressure temporarily during exercise helps. And the one thing you might want to be aware of is it's particularly the systolic blood pressure which increases. Secondly, we get redistribution of blood. Redistribution of blood. What do you mean, James? Where does this blood get redistributed to? And I'm going to say of cardiac output. Let's be correct. Redistribution of blood leaving the left ventricle per minute. So obviously, as we're sitting here at rest, it's probably slightly different for me because I'm a bit tense. I'm kind of on show here a little bit. But when I'm sitting here, very little, about 15% of my blood is going to my kind of skeletal muscle, my quads, my calves, my hamstrings, for example, my deltoids, other than to keep the tone of my body in my human shape, roughly. But of course, that 15%, if I start exercising, my body has a capacity to fire more blood to, for example, my quads if I start doing squats, say. And that is called the redistribution of blood. And you can call that, if you want to, vascular shunting. Okay, vascular shunting. And I hope you guys are aware that that is achieved because basically our arteries, there's a little artery, they have a little lining in them of smooth muscle. And well, actually it's more than little, to be honest, but that smooth muscle can either constrict inwards this way, or it can dilate outwards. And of course, if it dilates outwards, say to my quadricep muscle, it means more blood is going to pass through that channel, and as a result, more blood's going to get to my muscle during exercise conditions. So we redistribute that cardiac output to the working muscle. A couple of other points that are really important on the vascular side. A couple of other points. We get a decrease in blood viscosity. Remember that word I used before for the synovial fluid. My blood becomes less sticky, and because of that, it flows better. Okay, and basically the reason for that effectively is that the temperature increases. Okay, so it's basically a temperature thing, which causes that, which is actually really useful. Notice here I'm not putting down more hemoglobin, growing red blood cells, because this is short term. This is what happens during, not as a result afterwards in the adaptation process of the training. Now, respiratory, let's put a couple of points in here, please. First of all, we definitely get an increase in tidal volume. Remember, tidal volume is the quantity of air breathed in and out of the lung per breath. So if we increase that tidal volume during exercise, it means I go from this, I get really close to the microphone. This is kind of normal. That's my resting tidal volume, about 500 milliliters if you're interested. This is my max exercise tidal volume, or if I do what's called a forced breath. I hope that was as unpleasant for you as it was for me. But you see, my tidal volume went up as if I was in exercise conditions. Okay, I'm doing what's called a forced breath, but exercise has the same impact. Now, we also get an increase in breathing frequency. Now, breathing frequency simply means how many breaths you take per minute. Now, at rest, we don't really talk about that in GC, but in rest, it can be between about 8 and 14 breaths. 8 to 14 breaths is pretty typical. And it's actually something we don't really pay a lot of attention to, breathing rate. But of course, that's going to go up to during exercise conditions. So breathing frequency goes up, and that's useful for us to know. Okay, increased breathing frequency. The other thing is we get an increase in breathing depth. Now, I think I've already made this point, because increase in breathing depth and tidal volume are effectively the same point. But as a result of all of this, we get an increase in exchange of gases. Now, a couple of things I want to mention about this. Okay, how is it that our tidal volume goes up and our breathing becomes deeper? How is it that our breathing becomes faster? And I really want to mention this. We get the activation of respiratory muscles. So in the case of the diaphragm, for example, the intercostals, they're already working now as we sit here, we're breathing and quiet breathing or resting breathing, but they become more powerful during exercise, or they contract harder during exercise. And we also recruit other muscles. Now, I'm not going to get into mechanics right now, but we recruit other muscles to further power and speed our breathing depth and rate. Okay, lovely. All right, let's have a little scroll down here. We've got a question. Let's take our time. Let's make sure we do it good quality. I've put the answer in already, but let's make sure we do it well. So it says here, explain how. So before I get into anything about the question, I know I'm going to be using terms such as through, by, because, this means, note the capital. I'm going to be using therefore, comma. I mean, I might not use all of these, you understand. Therefore, comma. These are the things that are going to structure my response, because that means I'm explaining. So let's see what it's about. Explain how the respiratory system responds to the onset of exercise. So look, it's about the respiratory system. If I write a beautiful answer about, say, this, how many marks am I going to get? 0, because I have to pick out that word respiratory system. So let's have a little look. First bit first. This happens, note my little by, this happens by the increase in strength of respiratory muscle contractions. So respiratory, as I was just saying, muscle contractions, they increase in strength and get me a mark. And maybe I get a mark for saying diaphragm and intercostals. Maybe. Let's be generous. Okay, but maybe that's the same point. So I'm saying that we get a greater strength of contraction. Next point. Here we go. This means, oh look, I'm explaining how. This means that tidal volume, and that combined with, I've missed a word. Tidal volume, this should be increases in there. Tidal volume increases, and that combined with increased frequency of breathing. So I've got increased frequency, I've got increased tidal volume or increased depth. And then we've got this notion, we've got minute ventilation increases. Now, just let me go to the side here. If we take tidal volume, which is how much air we're breathing in and out of the lung, and we multiply it by frequency, how often we're taking those breaths, that equals what we call minute ventilation. Minute ventilation. So it's a nice term you can include in your answers. And what I'd say here is some of the examples use that term and some don't, which is why I'm kind of using it tentatively in this environment, okay? But tidal volume times frequency, it's a bit like the cardiac output point for the cardiac stuff, leads to minute ventilation. So of course, if minute ventilation goes up, we're basically saying there's more air available for gases exchange. But importantly there, I've explained only about the respiratory, and I've got enough in my answer to get me the mark. Now, this next question is really interesting. By the way, let me mention the DVR thing again. If that's too quick for you, just drag, in terms of this live stream, you can drag me back. Okay? So if you need to, do it. No problem at all. So, identify. We've got a different command to explain how. Identify. Now, when I say identify, it's kind of like I'm really in the area of just saying what it is. I'm not saying how. I'm not saying why, I'm just saying what the answer is. I'm naming that thing. Identify 2 immediate responses to the cardiac system to the onset of exercise. So 2 things first of all. I'm asked to identify, and I'm only going to get marks for my first 2 answers. If the number 2, or I don't know, the number 3 is named in your answer, or in your question, they're going to mark your first 2 or 3 responses. So make sure they're right, please. Here we go. I missed a little bit at the end of my question. Here you go. I won't go over that. You can see that I've already mentioned it. Therefore, total air available for gas exchange increases. And I've made a mess because I wrote 2 or 3 up there. Sorry about that, folks. Right. The first thing I'm identifying is, and really when we're doing identification, all we have to say is what something is or are. The first is stroke volume increases. So there's my mark. Stroke volume increases. I just have to name it. That's all I have to do. I don't have to say why. I'm just identifying. And the second is that heart rate increases. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so I get my 2 marks. Note I haven't described. Note I haven't explained. Note I haven't evaluated. Why? Because that's my command. Okay? And therefore it allows me to move on quite quickly. Now, again, your teacher might want to put that in for your exam board in context of A1-ness. have a chat about that, okay? So, next question here. We've got explain why. So again, I'm going to have to do more here than I just did, aren't I? Explain why cardiac output is greater during exercise conditions. So why has cardiac output gone up when we exercise? Okay, so I've got to be, again, going back to my terms from before, especially because this means therefore, comma. Let's see if I use them. Again, if you need to drag me back on the DVR, do it. Here we go. This is because, look, notice I'm not saying cardiac output is greater during exercise conditions, because don't bother, don't waste your time. This is because I'm answering. This is because cardiac output equals stroke volume times heart rate. Okay, let's use red there. So I've kind of defined my terms, first of all, give myself a mark for that. By heart rate increasing and through increasing stroke volume, so I've got heart rate increasing stroke volume, total cardiac output increases from approximately 5 litres at rest to as much as 30 to 40 litres during exercise conditions. Now, I've already got my 3 max, look down here. But again, I've given as much detail. And one of the key things I would say to all of you when you go and sit in this exam and anything else, right, this 5 litre to 30, 40 litres thing, it might be at the very upper echelons of kind of, in inverted commas, what we need to know. But here's my question to you as a student. If you know that, why would you leave it out? If it's correct and you know it, why would you leave it out? There are cases where you're asked to simply identify, so that's the skill you're going to perform. But this one, right, I know it goes from 5 litres at rest to a big number during exercise. Why wouldn't I include that within there? But I've explained that cardiac output is a product of stroke volume heart rate, and that heart rate and stroke volume increase. I get my mark. So look, we've got a really nice picture of what it means when we start exercising. Now, just a couple of other points. If you are on AQA board, don't forget to talk about DOMS in your 24 to 36 hours after. You can also get some credit for talking about the recovery process and the removal of lactic acid, okay? So just be aware of those, but I'm not going to go into those. I'm really focusing on this immediate effects of exercise, but you guys can, of course, go and talk about that if, you know, within that context. Okay, so let me sign off on this little section, and we'll carry on the rest of the session. Okay, we're back, right?
Yep, we are.
Okay, let me put your microphone up as well, Martin. So, whew, what a first session. That was a bit of a monster one, so a bit longer than I intended, but never mind, that's good. Gives us, a little bit more meat, as it were. So, good stuff. So, Martin, I'm going to open up for questions. So, tell me what we've got.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions that have come in. The first one is, how do footballers like Mo Salah recover after an intense football match?
Okay, that's quite broad.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any more detail on that?
Well, yes, the same Twitter user also wants to know. So after a match, what is most affected? Like certain muscles? Is there anything that's more affected by the exercise? And how would certain recovery techniques? How would they work for a certain part?
Okay, I'm going to do this one quick because it's kind of off topic a little bit for today. Who asked that, please?
That was a FPL Saviour.
FPL Saviour, thank you for the question, it's appreciated. How many followers they got?
I think 40.
Prospective Saviour. You need to work on that.
Yeah.
Now then, so the question the way I'd answer that in terms of recovery, so obviously we've got to focus on the leg musculature. That makes sense. So I would be suggesting that the footballer, whether it's Lika Martens or whether it was Mo Salah or any other footballer, they're going to have a big emphasis on obviously returning the worked muscle in the leg, especially the hamstring group, especially the quadriceps gastrocnemius, especially the hip flexors. They're going to be working on returning those muscles to a pre-exercise state. Okay, so there's immediate things they're going to do, such as an active cool down. There's going to be nutritional things that they're going to do in terms of both carbohydrate restorage or replenishment, and also using protein supplements. And they're also going to look at rehydration. But the point I would make to you is that there's also certain methods around that. By the way, I forgot to put my headphones back on. There are also certain methods that you want to have a think about, which is sort of like cold treatment, ice bath, or cryotherapy, for example. And they're really cool because the way they basically work is that they, first of all, when you get into the cold environment, it pulls away the blood from the cold area, so it sort of pushes it back into the middle of the body. And then when you get back into the warmer environment, then blood starts surging back through those parts of the body and kind of flushes things like lactic acid out of that muscle area. So they would be nice things, but that is literally scratching the surface of that question. So there'd be a focus on the legs, probably the core as well. There'd be a lot of stretching the day afterwards. Stretching is really good for returning extensibility. Then you'd be looking at replenishment, rehydration of nutritional stores, and then of course we'd be looking to gradually increase some exercise rhythms in preparation for the next performance. But one thing I would say about a footballer, though, it probably takes more than 2 to 3 days. So the idea of a footballer at the very, very highest level playing every 3 to 4 days is quite excessive, which is why you would find that a lot of the times people will, have a match off here and there to recover properly. Okay.
Brilliant. And the second question comes from Daisy.
Daisy, thank you for the question.
Who's asking, please can you explain stroke volume and do some examples?
Sure.
I really struggle with the concept.
Okay, Daisy.
I'm sure she's not alone.
No. I agree with that. So stroke volume, a nice way to think about it is I've got a cup of tea here, right? Okay. Imagine that my heart, which is on this very dodgily somewhere behind this dodgily textured pocket, imagine my heart was not firing blood around my aortic arch and then down my systemic circuit into the rest of my body. But imagine it was firing the blood and it was going into this cup. Okay, it would be messy, but nevertheless, what we'd find is every kind of beat, the quantity it gave me, that would be my stroke volume. So therefore, the way we describe that is it's the quantity of blood leaving the heart per contraction. So a stroke, remember, is a beat. It's a contraction, a beat, a stroke, and it's the volume in each stroke, each beat, each contraction. Now, the other thing I'd say to you, Daisy, is how that relates to cardiac output is very important. Because, of course, if I want to find out how much blood leaves my heart per minute, however much that was, if I multiply that by the amount of times it goes in, imagine this is a bigger bucket or something. If I multiply that by the amount of time it goes in, I'm going to get, per minute, I'm going to get the quantity of blood per minute, which is my cardiac output. So that's a nice way of thinking about it. But the other thing I'd say to you is realize that the majority of that blood at rest is going to places like your brain, to your kidneys, to your liver, to your stomach, places like that. When we start exercising, about 85% in maximum exercise, but 85% of that blood will be fired to muscles okay, to muscles because I'm working that area, and that's called redistribution or vascular shunting. So I hope that helps, Daisy. Do come back to us with another question if you're still unsure, okay? Don't hesitate.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Anything
and
else?
we just got one last question from Tommy from St. Benedict's, who's curious about what skincare do you use, James? Looking good.
I'm all about the Imperial leather soap, old school 1980s. I don't have any skin product. I think what you find is maybe this is quite an unnatural lighting. Maybe it turns me from being a 3.5 out of 10 into a 4.5 out of 10. Who knows? But thank you very much for the compliment. I genuinely appreciate it. Okay. So what I'd quickly like to do before we get onto our second session, and there's going to be interesting second session because we're going to look at the command to discuss, a question to discuss. Before we do that, can we quickly show a couple of photos of people and that we have, Marta? Are we on the screen? Oh, you're doing that already?
Yes. What do you mean?
You've got them on the screen already? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've got them. I'm all ready for you.
Okay, tell me who we've got, please.
Right. So here we've got I think it's Queen Elizabeth High School from Gainsborough. Sending us their pictures of their students hard at work. Really
good for you guys. Concentrate. Look at that light streaming in the back window, and you're listening to me. You poor people.
I love their the little pupils. Fantastic.
Okay.
We've also got Elizabeth College also sending us their pictures.
In Guernsey. Oh, and I recognise our timetable on the wall in the background as well. That's nice.
Yeah.
Mr. Eisenhuth, I'm assuming that is if I've got the right school. Thank you guys, we appreciate it.
And for the moment, that's it. I think we may be able to show a couple more at the end.
Okay, Marta, if you would, could you quickly show people how they get the entire playlist of GCSE PE onto wherever they want it? So guys, if you go to our YouTube channel, we're not going to give you the exact link because you just go to the YouTube channel and go to this playlist. We've put the entirety of GCSE PE into a single playlist for you. We've got the one that's live now, the one that's been before, and the 4 to come, all in the same playlist. You guys can embed that on your pages, and it makes it super easy to get to it. And it's also where the video links will be after the show's gone live as well. So get on it, get it there, and get that to your students, please. You teachers out there, please. You guys are often the gatekeepers or the like the key managers. You've got to unlock those possibilities for these students. Even if only 3 of your students decide to take this opportunity, that's 3 that couldn't if you don't provide them that thing. So do make that available to them. Okay, so any other photos, and we'll catch up with that at the end, Mark. Just a bit of wear time because we still have a big chunk to do. So, so I'm pretty much ready when you are, and let's do that, shall we?
You've got your camera?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And we are back. Doesn't this seem familiar? So not much has changed here apart from the first word. Long-term effective exercise, but we are in a completely different world in terms of our assumptions and what we're trying to understand. We are talking here about the adaptation process. Get it clear in your mind that that's what we are talking about. So when I think about the concept of adaptation, I'm thinking about something which is relatively speaking permanent. Yes, I know that reversibility can take place. We're talking about something, as we know already, which is long-term. But we're also talking about something that happens in the recovery period. So get that clear in your mind. Our fitness changes, our cardiac changes, our vascular respiratory changes, they happen. Why? Because we've given ourselves enough rest and exercise to allow that process to take place. And I can't emphasize strongly enough that that is a really important distinction for you to make, especially in your own kind of, how would I word it, including your own application of these principles to your own training. Okay, that being said, let's get on with it because we don't have a ton of time. So skeletal, we might think, right, well, what happens in the skeletal system? It doesn't change that much. Bones are bones, right? But we do get some changes. Now, we get an increase in bone density. So we can often say we lay down more calcium in the bone and it becomes stronger, thicker, more dense. Now, we're not going to get into the process of osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and osteocytes now. You can look forward to that at A-level. However, what I would say to you now is that this has a health implication. We have decreased chance of osteoporosis, osteoporosis, which means kind of brittle bones. And if you exercise over the course of your lifetime, this is something you are less likely to experience as you age, or indeed, before you're aged, I suppose it could be. But that's a really nice one. Now, in terms of muscular, we want to note some obvious things. We're going to have, Laura in this case, we're going to have increases in concepts such as strength. Okay, so the muscular system is going to become better able to provide contractile force. Okay, contractile force. By the way, I said Laura before, that's our gymnast. I should be talking about Kate here, I apologise. So we get increases, that's an arrow, believe it or not, not a tree. We get increases in strength, and we must be able to say there that that is because we get things such as increased contractile force. Let me actually put that in there, increase contractile force. Okay, so that's a nice one for us to include in our answers. A couple of other things that I think are nice for us to be aware. We are able to delay fatigue. So our muscular system becomes better able at delaying processes such as obla. Okay, so that is going to mean that we can work at higher intensities aerobically and be able to work at higher intensities before we get too tired to actually to have to stop what we're doing. We also get muscular, let me change that, got a lot lost there in my thinking, muscular hypertrophy. Okay, so we can't even say the cross-sectional area of the muscle becomes bigger because the muscle increases its size and number of muscle fibers and fibers within the muscle fiber. Now let's talk about cardiac a little bit. So a couple of key things for me here, long term. We get a down arrow reduced, I'm just going to call it RHR, resting heart rate. So of course what we find is if we were to look at average figures, we often say 60 to 80 beats per minute, but a really high quality aerobic athlete may move into something which is less than 60 beats per minute. Okay, less than 60 beats per minute. That has a cool name called bradycardia, but I think the concept is the most important thing right now. We also get an increase in heart muscle size. Now I'm assuming you're all screaming at me, say, James, this is called hypertrophy, a bit like I mentioned it before. Okay, hypertrophy. It is. When I think about this, I use one of two terms in my mind to distinguish it from this, even though it's the same concept. So I use the term cardiac hypertrophy, which obviously is related to the heart specifically and the cardiac muscle. If you want to get way jargony, then you can use the term myocardial hypertrophy. But hypertrophy is our key word, okay? Hypertrophy is our key word. Now, next point for me, really important in here, we get an increase in maximum cardiac output. And I just want us to think about this for a second. So if we go back way up here, I said to you a bit earlier, where's it gone? I said to you earlier on that cardiac output equals stroke volume times heart rate. So what are we saying here in the long-term adaptations? Well, we're saying that our resting heart rate has gone down, which means that the athlete has a greater range of heartbeats available during exercise, and it means that the muscle size has hypertrophied. And of course, what does that mean? It means an increase in stroke volume. So as a result of that, the potential for us to have a high cardiac output is much better. So this number I mentioned here, perhaps here, we can get nearer to the 40 rather than the 30 because we have this training in place. Increase maximum cardiac output. Okay, we're almost there. Respiratory system. A couple of key points. There's nothing I think going to shock you here. I don't think we're going to have decreased resting breathing frequency. So have a think about that for a second. That means that as a result of long-term training, the number of breaths per minute I take at rest is going to decrease. Why is that helpful for exercise? Because it means I've got a greater range of breathing rates when I start exercising. So it's important from that perspective. And the reason that happens, of course, is because I'm getting an increase in tidal volume, the amount of air I'm breathing in and out of the lung per breath. So that's really important. And I get an increase in maximal, during exercise, minute ventilation. So during exercise, because I've trained, I have a better capacity to draw air in and out of my lung, which of course means I've got more capacity to increase gaseous exchange amongst other things, okay? So my maximal minute ventilation, how much air I can breathe in and out of my lung per minute, increases at that maximal level. And we're saying maximal level because of course your minute ventilation at rest is basically the same whether you're fit or you're unfit. It just varies whether we have a higher or lower tidal volume and whether we have a higher or lower resting breathing rate. On the vascular side, I apologise folks, we also get an increase, and I'm going to use two terms here because different exam boards use them differently. We get an increase in what we call functional lung capacity. So that's literally how much air we can breathe in and out in a maximal breath. And just be aware that some of you call functional lung capacity vital capacity. So just check with your teacher which is the correct term for you, okay? But it's basically the same point, vital capacity or functional lung capacity, because we've trained. On the vascular side, to finish this off, we get capillarization. Okay, capillarization. This is the growth of new and thicker, more dense capillaries at the alveoli, so at the lung basically, and muscle. So we get more capillaries available at the lung, the alveoli, and the muscle. We also get stronger smooth muscles. So that, remember those smooth muscles I talked about earlier, which are the ones that are within the arteriole. These muscles get stronger. What does that mean? We're better able to redistribute cardiac output to where it's needed. Okay, so stronger smooth muscles, so we get better or improved redistribution or vascular shunting. And I should have said at the start, actually I should have said over here folks, on the respiratory side, we get stronger long term, not just in the contraction, stronger respiratory muscles, which of course is why our tidal volume would actually go up. Okay, so we've got a range of adaptations there which are going to power an increased aerobic and in some cases anaerobic performance. Now this is where it gets meaty. Let's have a look at this question. Discuss. There's some people out there today who are terrified of this concept of discussing, and of course what we're also saying here is that we've got maximal marks available depending on your exam board, how many marks that is. But discuss the effects of high quality aerobic training on the human body. Two things for me before I partly answer this question, because what I'm going to do with this question is I'm going to answer, if you like, the first 2/3, and then I'm looking forward to receiving you completing the answer in a completed format. So first of all, let's take the concept of discuss. What does this mean? Well, it means we have to decide what skill to show. I could, for example, evaluate, okay, which means strengths and weaknesses. But the problem with that is I've been told that the quality is the training is high quality, so maybe there's not that many weaknesses to evaluate. I could analyze. Analyze means I break it down and explain it, more of which in a second. I could potentially compare. How does aerobic training compare to anaerobic training? But I haven't been asked that, so that doesn't look to be the one. I could explain, saying how, why, what. That seems relevant, and I didn't quite fit it in here. But I could also describe. I could say what the characteristics or composition of this thing is. So I've got to choose which behaviour I'm going to undertake in this discuss question. The other thing here is I've been asked about the human body. Now, that's quite a macro concept. The whole body? Don't you mean, question, these different systems? These different systems? So, of course, what we're leaning to in this answer is we're leaning to an analysis. We break it down into different systems. We connect them up, of course, and we explain it. The other thing is I feel, looking at the question, I need to describe what high-quality aerobic training is. So let's have a look at it. Let's go through it almost sentence by sentence. Let me show you what I did first. Let me show you what I did first. Okay, so notice here I'm going to go into describing mode, okay? Because I've got this term and I want to say what it is before I go any further. Now we know we don't get circle tick 1 mark for these answers. We get a leveled answer. So let's go through it. High quality aerobic training is characterized by, so look, I haven't done an introduction. I'm just saying high quality training, aerobic training is, and it's this thing coming up, continuous and fartlek training. Now I know some of you do HIIT training. I know some of you do aerobic intervals, but I'm going to stick with those two because it's united across all the boards, at an intensity of 80% heart rate max. Note that I'm not saying 60 to 80%. Why? Because this is an athlete. This is kind of nearer that fat burning range. So I'm up at this 85. It could even be plus 88 at this 80. Sorry, it could even be up to 85. But an intensity of 80% heart rate max for between 30 and 120 minutes. Now just reflect on what I've just put in there. I've just done the FIT principle. I've got type, I've got time or duration if you're on the WJC or EDUCAS board, I've got intensity, and I've got frequency. I've quickly characterized my high quality aerobic training by using my FIT principle. Even though it's not in the question, I'm just saying what this thing is. Then I'm going to go on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start analyzing. I'm going to break this human body down into parts. So what shall I start with? Let me do the respiratory system first. Let's have a look. Firstly, comma, and by the way, that comma should be there. Expect yourself to use it. The respiratory system experiences hypertrophied muscles such as the diaphragm, which in turn causes increased tidal volume and functional lung capacity, or vital capacity. Don't forget, you might need to use that term. This means increased quantities of oxygen for exchange. I'm starting now to explain how the body responds to this training. And I've done the respiratory system first. What's going to come next? Let me think. Let's say I'm going to switch now and I'm going to have a look at vascular. Okay, vascular. So now I look at my next sentence and look what I've got. Secondly, comma, the comma matters. If you write secondly, firstly, thirdly, finally, ultimately, whatever, it has a comma after it at the start of the sentence. Secondly, the vascular system adapts capillarization. I should have said capillaries there. Capillarization at the alveoli, and I've got muscle there as well, through the growth of new red blood cells. I should have put that up here. How could I have forgotten? More red blood cells, which means, of course, more hemoglobin. James, how could you have forgotten something so pivotal? Therefore, comma, there is more hemoglobin to carry O2 and oxygen. Moreover, comma, smooth muscles become stronger, vasoconstricting and dilating, and cardiac output can be distributed to where it is needed. So I'm getting all of my adaptations down. Now, what system am I going to look at next? You guys could choose any system you want that I haven't covered. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to cardiac. It seems to feel like the right time. Cardiac, I could do muscular, I could do skeletal, but cardiac. Let's put our little bit of answer in here. Thirdly, comma, the cardiac system changes by a decrease in RHR. Now, I'd encourage you to write resting heart rate in your actual answer, but a decrease in resting heart rate and an associated increase in stroke volume because the heart has hypertrophied. This means greater cardiac output leaves the heart. Now, you notice here, I've put ... Why? Because I want you guys now to finish this answer off. Okay, I've filled my bit of spacing, but I wouldn't stop there, obviously. I want you guys now to finish that answer off. How would you go through? Now, you might say to me, well, James, I need to evaluate my answer. This question doesn't encourage evaluation. The only thing you might want to think about with evaluation here, one weakness could be that we might have too much weight-bearing exercise. We might have too much, we might overtrain, not fulfill the principle of moderation, for example. Okay, so we might overtrain, for example. Those could be weaknesses, but assuming that isn't the case, what we need to do here is we need to break this concept down and we need to explain it. Okay, and that's what I'd like to think about. So I'm really intrigued to see which of you put magnificent answers in and submit them to us to make sure that we get a really great example of this to complete. Now, I guess a health warning here. I've presented that model, I think, to 7 different exam board specifications, potentially looking at a question like that. Can I make myself clear to everybody that this is coherently a completely solid answer to that question if we interpret the discuss to be an analyzed thing, which is ultimately an explanation. Okay, so get that clear in your minds, please. We're doing this. If your exam board say that when they when they say discuss, you must evaluate, because there is one that does that. Obviously evaluate, because they're saying to you, you must evaluate, even though we don't put that in the question. Interesting. But if they say that, then of course you've got to follow that remit and you've got to do that. What we're trying to provide here is a picture for teachers and for students of what a high quality answer would look like if we take the question as high quality too. And that's what we're trying to do. Woo! So, there we go. So a big chunk of information there today. We're going to take any questions, first of all, that kind of on the subject matter or about the topic, and then we're going to, hopefully we've got a few photos to show, have we? All right, so hang in for the photos, because we are going to do a little competition announcement as well in a second. So questions first of all, Marta.
Yes, very quickly. If you could quickly clarify the point about discussing, what is exactly that students are meant to be doing if it says discuss?
Okay, I can only answer and exactly what discuss means from a specific exam board's perspective. So that bounces back to the teachers in the classrooms. You guys have got to work with your students on the specific exam board instruction. For me, take this as a generic picture. Discuss simply means to talk about the key points, but hidden behind discuss questions are typically a description, an evaluation, an analysis, an explanation, or a comparison. And often the nature of the question, like the one we just looked at, was lent more towards analysing, breaking something into parts and explaining it. Often the question will give you an indication. So if I said to you, discuss the strengths and weaknesses of James's online teaching, I guess you would realise that was about an evaluate. It would be an evaluate kind of question. There wouldn't be many weaknesses, right? I mean, you guys, and you know. So there's loads. But you would do that in an evaluate structure because the discuss is leading you towards that. Discuss the similarities and differences between James and Marta. That's clearly a comparison question. So hidden behind those discuss questions are usually other skills. But let me repeat that health warning. You must work with your teachers for the exam board specific requirements and what that suggests. And for just on my level, I'm also intrigued to see what happens this summer and how the exam boards manage that. I'm trying to give you the best information I can at this point. Okay, so that's my answer to that. I hope that's not copying out for you guys. I also don't want to say too much and push you in the wrong direction. All right, so it's actually a very loving, supportive position from mine. I'm not trying to hold information back for you. I'm just saying, I'm just being cautious to do it's exactly this thing, because I think it would be dangerous for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's it for questions for now.
Okay, fine.
What we do have is quite a lot of pictures being sent through Twitter that have, there's some really good ones. So
okay,
let me just push this. So we've got to start with, we've got Ryan Thorne sending us this picture Thorne, because it's Sammy's birthday today. So happy birthday, Sammy.
Hey, Sammy. Sammy, I don't know which one you are in the photo, Sammy, but happy birthday. Many congratulations. I also like the gentleman at the very back of the picture doing what appears to be a some kind of double rear naked choke MMA Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu move on two of his mates. Just be gentle, be kind, be nice to each other.
And then we've also got Harry, who's sending us a picture of one of his mates doing, really concentrating and doing all the right things.
I like
that someone
one of his
should
mates.
Be doing
I don't know what your name is, young person, but I like that because you've got the stream on, you've got your notes, you've got your pencil case. I think you've got some kind of Twitter on your phone and you're interacting.
And a snack.
And a snack. Fair play. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly good for you. I don't know. Please let us know what your name is because that's a really good photo. I hope they had permission to take that.
But Harry has also sent me, not happy with sending us the picture of the maid doing all the right thing.
Okay.
Harry has also very kindly sent us a picture of his maid's...
Let me lean in. Hang on.
His maid's notes.
Oh, wow.
So that is properly impressive.
Hey, good for you. Good.
So really well done.
If you want to send us real close up with those photos, we'll share them with people if you want. If you're willing to. I mean, it's your property, so it's up to you. But if you wanted us to, we'd get them out to a lot of people. Your choice.
But really well done.
Great.
Thank you
and thank you
Harry for participating and sharing, and thank you to his friend for being so good.
Really good.
We've also got Joseph Mott, who's sending us, they're having great fun with revision.
They are happy.
This picture.
However, gentlemen, what's the name, please? Joseph.
Joseph. He's loving Big James, is.
Oh, I've gone right off Joseph. For
the and he sent another one, by the way, as well.
Okay. This confirms
my comment. And he's saying, please put us on the stream. That sounds a bit needy, Joseph, but
Right, gentlemen. let me tell you something. When you're doing your photography, you have to think about your light sources and your ISO settings, gentlemen. You've got them wrong. Next stream, I want to see an improvement. So consider where your light's coming from, and consider how much light through the ISO setting is entering your sensor. So let's see some better. But Joseph, thank you very much for those. Genuinely appreciate. Oh, that's a nice question.
Yes,
Where's
that's
that?
Canon Slade.
Canon Slade.
Yes.
Oh, great. That's really nice. Well, some of those folks really want to be in the photos. Some really don't
Want to.
That's a nice. That's nice in there. Yeah,
yes,
good for you, and
really
well attended. That's one of the things. I think we've had like 60, 70 on the show tonight. But behind each of those is like 20 people. So it's actually a pretty well attended thing. It's good to see. You're very welcome, you guys. Thank you for attending. It's appreciated. Any others?
And also Samuel
nice
Taylor
seats.
sending us this picture from, I would assume, Pigott School.
Pigott School. Now, I can only remember Mr. Keneally's name at Pigott School. Colleague who works at Pigott. I'm so sorry, I don't recall your name off the top of my head. Remind me, please, because you guys are really close to us. And I have always worked with Mr. Keneally at Pigott before. He abandoned you, didn't he? But it's really nice, and I appreciate you getting in touch. Mr. Keneally, I'm only joking. You know I love you. Any others?
That's it for now.
Okay, so guys, we've had a super, super, super busy session there. Can I remind you that we have A-level sessions now on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, all of those P1s at 4 o'clock. If you GCSE students out there, any of you studying Spanish GCSE, we have GCSE sessions at 1 o'clock tomorrow, Tuesday, and 1 o'clock Thursday. So tune in. You can also take those on demand. We're also going to put the playlist together for you. And can I please, even if you're sat in a classroom and your teacher's shown this to you today, can you please go home and subscribe? We can only do this if you get that subscriber number up for us. I know it might sound like a begging. Well, it is begging. Let's be honest, I'm grovelling. But we do need you to do it because it's actually really difficult. It takes a lot to put these things on technologically, cost-wise, preparation, notes, perspiration level. So you guys, that's the one thing you have to give back. And please do it. It genuinely makes a difference. So please, please, please do it. Okay. Hey.
And the pictures of...
have you put that on the screen?
Harry's... no, I haven't put this note. No,
Okay.
let me just. We've got the name for Harry's friend.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, this is what another.
Who is that person?
The friend.
Yes.
His name is. I'll tell you in a second. John Whiffen.
John Whiffen. So
really
John,
well
both
done.
you, and was it
Both,
Harry?
yes.
Oh, okay, so both of you, you're going to be receiving a little gift from us. Can you both email us at socialmedia@theeverlearner.com, socialmedia@theeverlearner.com, and we're going to send you a little prize out. There was one person we need to get hold of from last week who hasn't sent us their address, right?
I've got the name, not the surname.
Okay,
it was Mr. Birthday Boy Jack.
Okay.
Can't remember surname.
Wasn't it Jake?
Oh, maybe Jake.
Jake,
Oh, yes, you're right.
It was your birthday a few days ago, Jake. If we didn't hear from you about where to send your pack to, could you get in touch, please? socialmedia@theeverlearner.com, and we'll get that sent out to you. All the others have already gone, so we'd like to do that. Right, so last things from me.
Ready.
Get on to the interactive questions, get them filled out. We want to read those, and we want to publish those, and we want to get them out there. If you want to contact us, get in touch via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. We are happy to answer any questions that you like. You can also email socialmedia@theeverlearner.com or comment on one of the YouTube videos. We will get back to you, okay? We will get back to you. Might not be in a second, but we will get back to you. So if you've got a question, get in touch. So there's me breathing a little. I think I'm all done.
Mm-hmm.
See you lot later. Have a good evening, and I genuinely appreciate you being here. Teachers, thank you.
The traditional classroom environment doesn't suit everyone. Students that don't fit this pace of learning begin to lose confidence. The problem is, the current learning model has holes in it. Luckily, the EverLearner.com is here to fill those holes. With the EverLearner Classroom, each student is given a chance to master each subject at their own pace. With thousands of video tutorials and tens of thousands of automated questions on the site, students can progress at their own individual pace. And because every interaction is tracked within the site, teachers can review students' progress and gain access to razor-sharp data. Teachers will have more time to engage with small groups and be better informed of where their time and support is needed. With the EverLearner, teachers can leave the traditional model behind and become facilitators, coaches, and inspirers. There's a reason we have over 100,000 registered students. To learn more, visit our website today.
I apologize for everything.